The rain hammered against the windows of Kang Soo-min's apartment, each drop a staccato reminder of the evening that refused to fade from her mind. 3 days had passed since the dinner, yet the memory clung to her like smoke. The way Park Tae-joon's eyes had darkened when she'd stepped away from his attempted kiss, the subtle tightening of his jaw that betrayed something beneath that practiced smile. She told herself it was nothing, just another uncomfortable blind date in a string of well-meaning setups from friends who couldn't understand that she'd built a life that didn't require a man to complete it. Ji-woo's laughter echoed from the living room where she sprawled across the carpet, colored pencils scattered around her like fallen leaves. At 10 years old, her daughter possessed an innocence that Soo-min guarded with a ferocity that surprised even herself. 5 years. 5 years since the accident that had taken her husband and left her to navigate single motherhood in a city that moved too fast and cared too little. She'd learned to be both mother and father, protector and provider, and she'd done it without needing anyone's pity or, worse, their opportunistic interest. "Yama, can Hyun-ki come over this weekend?" Ji-woo called out, not looking up from her drawing. "He wants to show me how to draw dragons properly. His are really good." Soo-min paused in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Hyun-ki? The quiet boy you mentioned." "Yeah, he's in my class. His dad picks him up in this really nice black car. I think his dad is rich or something." Ji-woo giggled, adding scales to what appeared to be a very enthusiastic dragon breathing fire across the page. Something shifted in Soo-min's chest, though she couldn't name it yet. Rich. Black car. Seoul was full of wealthy men with expensive vehicles. It meant nothing. The next morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds that threatened more rain. Hanul Elementary stood like a modern fortress in the quiet Gangnam suburb, all glass and clean lines, a monument to expensive education and even more expensive connections. Soo-min had fought hard to get Ji-woo enrolled here. The school's reputation was impeccable, its network invaluable. She'd never imagined it might become something else entirely. Parent-teacher conference week always brought a nervous energy to the school. Soo-min arrived early, signed in at the gleaming reception desk, and wandered the corridors while waiting for her appointment with Ms. Lee. Student artwork lined the walls, watercolors of families, crayon drawings of pets, and elaborate sketches that showed real talent. She found herself smiling despite the lingering unease from the blind date. This was Ji-woo's world, safe and structured and far removed from the intensity of men like Park Tae-joon. The lobby bulletin board stopped her cold. Photos from the recent charity gala covered the cork surface. Smiling children in formal wear, proud parents writing checks, teachers beaming beside generous donors. Her eyes tracked across the images absently until they snagged on one particular photograph. A group shot, the PDA board, and there, unmistakable in his perfectly tailored suit, stood Park Tae-joon. His arm rested on the shoulder of a young boy with serious eyes and neat hair. The caption read, "PDA Vice President Park Tae-joon and son Hyun-ki, generous supporters of our scholarship fund." The world tilted. Soo-min grabbed the edge of the bulletin board, her breath catching in her throat. Hyun-ki, Ji-woo's new friend, the boy with the fancy car and the dragon drawings. Park Tae-joon's son. Her phone felt heavy in her trembling hands as she zoomed in on the image, searching for some detail that would make this make sense. But there was no mistaking it. The same sharp features, the same commanding presence, the same smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. How had she not known? Why hadn't he mentioned it during their dinner? The questions piled up like debris after a storm, each one more unsettling than the last. The conference with Ms. Lee passed in a blur. Soo-min nodded mechanically through discussions of Ji-woo's excellent grades and social development, her mind spinning through scenarios. Coincidence? It had to be coincidence. Seoul wasn't that small. But even as she told herself this, doubt crept in like water through cracks. She emerged from the meeting into the afternoon gloom, her heels clicking on the wet pavement of the parking lot. And there he was, leaning against a sleek black Mercedes, chatting with other parents as if he belonged here, as if he hadn't been rejected 3 nights ago by the woman, now staring at him from across the asphalt. Their eyes met. Time suspended itself for a heartbeat. Then Park Tae-joon's face split into that same disarming smile, and he was walking toward her with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. "Soo-min SSI," he said, his voice carrying just enough warmth to seem friendly but not desperate. "Fancy seeing you here." She forced her expression into something neutral, professional. "You're Hyun-ki's father?" "I am." He stopped at a respectful distance, but somehow his presence still felt invasive. "Small world, isn't it? Our children are in the same class. Ji-woo is a wonderful girl. Hyun-ki talks about her constantly. She's quite talented with art, apparently." The words were perfect, the delivery flawless. But Soo-min had spent 5 years reading between lines, looking for danger in ordinary conversations. "You didn't mention you had a son. At dinner." Something flickered across his face. Too quick to name, gone before she could analyze it. "You didn't ask about children. We were focused on other things." He glanced at his watch, an expensive piece that caught what little light the overcast sky provided. "I have a meeting, but perhaps we should talk soon. About the children. It's good for parents to communicate when their kids become friends. Don't you think?" It was reasonable. It was exactly what any responsible parent would suggest. So why did it feel like a trap closing around her? "Perhaps," she managed, already moving toward her car. "Soo-min SSI," he called after her. She turned despite herself. His expression had shifted into something she couldn't quite read. Regret? Calculation? Both? "About the other night. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. Sometimes I come on too strong. It's a bad habit." "It's fine," she lied. "We're just not compatible." "Maybe." He smiled again, but this time it was different, sharper somehow, like light glinting off a blade. But fate seems to have other plans. She watched him walk away, climb into that pristine black Mercedes, and drive off with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd never had to worry about traffic or consequences. Only when his car disappeared around the corner did Soo-min realize she'd been holding her breath. That evening, over dinner at their small kitchen table, Soo-min tried to keep her voice casual. "Tell me more about Hyun-ki. What's he like?" Ji-woo's face lit up. "He's really quiet, but once you get to know him, he's funny. He knows all these facts about history and stuff. And his drawings are amazing, way better than mine." "What about his family?" "His dad comes to school a lot. He bought everyone's drawings at the art show last month and gave the money to the scholarship fund. Some kids say he's super rich because he builds those huge buildings downtown." Ji-woo paused, chewing thoughtfully. "He seems nice, but kind of serious. Not like you, Yama. You smile more." "Serious, rich, generous with the school." On the surface, Park Tae-joon appeared to be exactly what he claimed. A successful businessman devoted to his son's education and the school community. But Soo-min had learned that surfaces often concealed depths that could drown you if you weren't careful. After Ji-woo went to bed, Soo-min opened her laptop. The search began innocuously enough. Park Tae-joon Seoul. Pages of results flooded her screen. Articles about park developments, profiles praising the company's rapid growth and community contributions, photos of Tae-joon at ribbon-cutting ceremonies and charity events. He looked every inch the respectable developer, shaking hands with politicians and posing beside architectural models. But Soo-min had been married to a financial advisor. She knew how to look deeper, how to follow money trails through corporate structures. An hour into her research, the first cracks appeared. A forum post from 2 years ago, quickly deleted but preserved in cached pages. Park Developments won another bid. Funny how their competitors keep withdrawing at the last minute. Another post, more explicit. Anyone else think it's suspicious that Park's construction sites never have labor problems? Like ever? She dug deeper, her coffee growing cold beside her. The Yang-uni family name surfaced in a blog post about organized crime history in South Korea. The Kangpai crime syndicates that had ruled the underworld since the 1970s, infiltrating construction, entertainment, and real estate. Their founder, Cho Yang-un, had become a legend before his arrest in the Philippines after decades of evading Korean authorities. A business registry document showed Park Developments as a subsidiary of Daehan Holdings, which itself traced back to companies once connected to Yang-uni interests before the crackdown. The connections were thin, circumstantial, easily explained as coincidence or ordinary business dealings. Except Soo-min didn't believe in that many coincidences. She closed her laptop as the first light of dawn crept through her windows. Tomorrow she'd drop Ji-woo at school, go to work, pretend everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. The man who'd bought everyone's art show drawings, who served on the PDA board, who'd tried to kiss her 3 nights ago, he carried shadows that no amount of charitable donations could dispel. And somehow, her daughter had become friends with his son. What will Soo-min discover about Park Tae-joon's true identity? And why did he really pursue her at that dinner? The next 3 days passed with the surreal quality of a nightmare where you're aware you're dreaming but can't force yourself awake. Soo-min went through the motions of her normal life. Client presentations at work, grocery shopping, helping Ji-woo with homework. But every moment felt saturated with a creeping dread she couldn't shake. At the office, Min-ji cornered her by the coffee machine on Thursday morning. "So, how was the date with Tae-joon? He asked about you, you know." Soo-min's hand froze over the sugar packets. "He asked about me?" "Yesterday. Called the office to talk about a potential marketing contract. His company might need our services for their new development in Songpa. But before we talked business, he mentioned you. Wanted to know if you'd said anything." Min-ji's eyes sparkled with gossip-hungry interest. "He seemed really interested, Soo-min. You should give him another chance. Did you tell him I worked here before setting up the date?" The question came out sharper than intended. Min-ji blinked, taken aback. "Well, yeah. He asked where you worked, what you did. I thought I was being helpful. Why? Did something happen?" "No, nothing happened." Soo-min forced a smile and retreated to her desk, but her mind raced. He'd asked where she worked before ever meeting her. Had asked about her specifically. The blind date suddenly felt less blind and more orchestrated, though she couldn't fathom why. That evening, she pulled out the old file box she kept in her closet, the one filled with documents from her late husband's work. Kim Jae-sung had been meticulous about keeping records, even bringing some files home when he was working on complex accounts. She'd kept everything after his death, unable to face sorting through it, unable to let it go. Now she spread the papers across her bedroom floor, searching for anything related to Park Developments. It took an hour, but finally she found it, a folder marked with the company logo and her husband's handwritten notes in the margins. The documents detailed financial audits from 6 years ago, just before Jae-sung's death. Most of it was standard accounting language, but certain passages were highlighted with question marks and exclamation points scattered throughout. One note in particular made her blood run cold. Money flow doesn't match construction costs. Where is the rest going? Need to verify overseas accounts. Another, dated 2 weeks before his accident. Meeting with Park next Tuesday. Need answers about the Singapore transfers. Soo-min sat back on her heels, the papers trembling in her hands. Her husband had been investigating Park Developments, had been questioning their financial practices, and 2 weeks after scheduling a meeting with Park Tae-joon, though the note didn't specify if it was with him personally or someone else from the company. Kim Jae-sung had died in what police ruled a simple traffic accident. Rainy night, slick roads, his car skidding into a concrete barrier on the highway. She'd never questioned it, never had reason to, until now. The anonymous text arrived on Friday afternoon, just as she was picking up Ji-woo from school. Unknown number. The message was brief and cryptic. Check the school basement. Not everything is as it seems. Soo-min stared at the screen, her heart hammering. A prank? A warning? Or something worse, a trap? She deleted the message immediately, but it burned in her memory like an afterimage. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in the dark, listening to Ji-woo's soft breathing from the next room, and made a decision that was either brave or incredibly foolish. Saturday morning, she told Ji-woo they needed to pick up a forgotten art project from school. The building would be mostly empty on weekends, just a skeleton security staff. The school felt different without the bustle of children and teachers. Their footsteps echoed in the sterile hallways as they made their way to Ji-woo's classroom. Soo-min helped her daughter retrieve the art supplies, chatting casually while her mind calculated risks and scenarios. After they loaded everything into the car, she told Ji-woo to wait while she checked if she'd left her phone in the conference room. "But, Iama, your phone is in your hand," Ji-woo pointed out with the devastating logic of a 10-year-old. "My work phone," Soo-min improvised. "Just wait here. 5 minutes." The basement access was marked staff only, but her parent ID badge worked on the electronic lock, a security oversight she'd noted before but never exploited. The stairs descended into a corridor lit by fluorescent tubes that buzzed and flickered. Storage rooms lined both sides, filled with old desks, surplus supplies, and archived files. She almost turned back, almost convinced herself that she was being paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there were only coincidences. But then she found the room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. The interior looked like a storage space at first glance. Cardboard boxes stacked against the walls, filing cabinets, shelves lined with binders. But as Soo-min moved deeper into the room, her flashlight beam caught details that didn't fit. Boxes labeled construction materials, park developments, but far too small and light to contain building supplies. A desk in the corner with a laptop that was still warm, recently used. And there, in a filing cabinet left carelessly unlocked, ledgers that showed figures that made no sense for school donations. Her hands shook as she photographed pages with her phone, not fully understanding what she was seeing, but recognizing that something was deeply wrong. The numbers were massive, millions of one flowing through accounts labeled with innocuous names like Scholarship Fund and Facilities Enhancement. But the dates and amounts didn't align with any school expenditures she'd seen on the PDA reports that came home in Ji-woo's backpack. A photo on the desk made her freeze. Park Tae-joon, younger but unmistakable, shaking hands with an older man whose face stirred recognition. She'd seen that face before, in the documentary about the Yong-eun family. Cho Yong-eun himself before his arrest. Footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Voices, men speaking in low, urgent tones. Soo-min killed her flashlight and pressed herself behind a tall filing cabinet. Her phone clutched to her chest, her breath shallow and silent. The basement door opened. The voices grew closer. "The shipment needs to be ready by Monday," one man said. "Boss wants everything moved before the school inspection." "What about the woman?" "Soo-min. She's been asking questions." A pause. Then a third voice, one she recognized with sickening certainty. Park Tae-joon, his tone cold and controlled. "I'll handle her. She's curious, not stupid. Once she understands the situation, she'll fall in line. They always do. And if she doesn't, then we'll make sure she does. The same way we handled her husband." The words hung in the air like poison. Soo-min's vision tunneled, her lungs refusing to work properly. They'd killed Jae-sung. It wasn't an accident. They'd murdered her husband because he'd discovered whatever this was, this operation hidden beneath a children's school, disguised as charitable donations and civic duty. The men moved on to other topics, details about shipments and accounts and territories that meant nothing to her shock-numbed mind. She waited, pressed against the filing cabinet, barely breathing, until their voices faded and the door closed above. She had to get out, had to get to Jiwoo, had to think. The drive home passed in a blur. Jiwoo chattered about her recovered art supplies, oblivious to her mother's death grip on the steering wheel. Soo-min's mind raced through options, each one more impossible than the last. Go to the police? With what evidence? Photos of ledgers she didn't fully understand, and an overheard conversation she couldn't prove? And if Park Tae-joon had connections to the old Kangpai networks, how deep did those connections go? Who could she trust? That night, after Jiwoo fell asleep, Soo-min sat in her darkened living room and faced a truth she'd been avoiding. The blind date hadn't been random. Tae-joon had sought her out specifically, either to gauge what she knew about her husband's investigation or, worse, out of some twisted sense of control, keeping his enemies close. His questions during dinner took on a sinister edge in retrospect. Her late husband's job, her daily routines, Jiwoo's school schedule. He'd been cataloging her life, measuring vulnerabilities, and she'd rejected him. In front of a restaurant full of people, she'd walked away from a man who apparently didn't tolerate rejection well. The knock on her door at 11 p.m. made her jump. She approached cautiously, peered through the peephole, and found Min-ji on the other side, looking disheveled and frightened. "We need to talk," Min-ji said the moment Soo-min opened the door. "It's about Tae-joon." "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." They sat at the kitchen table, two women nursing cold tea and colder truths. Min-ji's story spilled out in fragments: a gambling debt 3 years ago, a loan from a friend who turned out to be connected to Park Tae-joon's organization. When she couldn't pay, they'd offered an alternative: information, access, ways to help them keep track of people they needed to monitor. "When he asked about you, I thought it was just romantic interest," Min-ji whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was setting up a friend on a date. But after you rejected him, they called me, asked what you'd said about him. If you seem suspicious, they want to know everything about you now, Soo-min. Your schedule, who you talk to, what you do online. Why are you telling me this now?" Min-ji looked up, her eyes red and desperate. "Because today I heard them talking. They're planning something. Soon. They think you're a problem that needs to be solved. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you and Jiwoo because I was too scared to warn you." The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture more frightening than Soo-min had imagined. Park Tae-joon wasn't just using the school as a front for money laundering. He was using it as a surveillance hub, a way to monitor and control families connected to people he needed to influence or intimidate. The donations, the PDA involvement, the charity galas, all of it was infrastructure for a criminal operation that had inherited the old Kangpai methods and modernized them for a new era. And he'd targeted her because her dead husband had stumbled onto the truth 5 years ago. "What do I do?" Soo-min asked, though she was really asking herself. Min-ji grabbed her hand. "Run. Take Jiwoo and disappear. These people, Soo-min, they're not just criminals. They're connected everywhere. Police, politicians, business. The Yang Uni family might be officially gone, but its networks never really died. They just got better at hiding." But even as Min-ji spoke, Soo-min felt something hard and cold crystallizing in her chest. Run. Let them win. Let them think she was weak enough to be scared away. She'd spent 5 years building a life from ruins, protecting her daughter, surviving in a city that chewed up the vulnerable and spit them out. She'd faced loneliness and grief and the suffocating weight of single parenthood, and she'd come through it stronger. Park Tae-joon had made a critical error. He'd assumed she was like the others, that she'd fall in line once she understood the situation. But he hadn't counted on what it meant to be a mother who'd already lost everything that could be taken from her except her child. He'd wanted to handle her? Fine. Let him try. Will Soo-min run and hide, or will she fight back against the Mafia boss who destroyed her family? What happens when their worlds collide at the school gala? The school's annual charity gala was legendary in Gangnam circles, a glittering affair where Seoul's elite gathered under the guise of supporting education while really networking, showing off new luxury purchases and jockeying for social position. This year's event was held in the school's auditorium, transformed by thousands of won worth of decorations into something resembling a palace ballroom. Crystal chandeliers borrowed from event companies, silk drapes in the school colors, tables laden with catered delicacies that most of the children who attended the school would never recognize. Soo-min arrived wearing a dress she'd bought specifically for tonight. Dark blue, elegant but not flashy, with a neckline that suggested confidence without desperation. She'd spent the past 2 weeks preparing for this moment with the careful strategy of someone planning a campaign rather than attending a social event. The photos from the basement were backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts. She'd recorded a video confession detailing everything she knew, encrypted it, and set it to auto-send to multiple journalists and law enforcement agencies if she didn't input a cancel code every 12 hours. Min-ji had helped her identify 3 parents who'd expressed quiet concerns about Park Tae-joon's outsized influence on the school. Allies who might be convinced to act if presented with the right evidence. It was a fragile plan, full of assumptions and hope, but it was all she had. Ji-woo was safe with a trusted friend's family for the weekend, told that mommy had important work to do. Soo-min had hugged her daughter that morning with an intensity that made Ji-woo squirm and laugh, unaware that her mother was memorizing the weight of her, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, just in case. Park Tae-joon stood at the center of the auditorium, surrounded by admirers and supplicants, looking every inch the benevolent philanthropist in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Soo-min's car. He saw her the moment she entered, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. He'd probably expected her to hide after Min-ji's warning. Expected her to be scared. He excused himself from his conversation and crossed the room with measured steps, carrying 2 champagne flutes. "Soo-min SSI," he said, offering her a glass. "I'm surprised to see you here." Pleasantly surprised. She took the champagne but didn't drink. "I'm a parent. These events are part of the responsibility." Indeed. His eyes searched her face, looking for something. "I've been hoping we could talk. Privately. There are things I think you should understand about your husband's death." The directness of it caught her off guard. She'd expected games, deflection, but here he was laying it out in the open. "Is that a threat?" "It's a clarification." He gestured toward a quiet corner near the stage, away from the crowd. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Then you can decide what you want to believe. Against every instinct screaming at her to refuse, Soo-min followed him. This was what she'd come for, after all. To confront him, to make him reveal himself. But now, isolated in this corner with the galas, noise muffled by distance, she felt the full weight of her own recklessness. Tae-joon set his champagne down and turned to face her fully. "Your husband was a good man. Thorough. Too thorough, as it turned out. You killed him." The words came out flat, emotionless, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I didn't, but I couldn't stop it either." His expression shifted into something that might have been regret on a different man's face. Jae-sung discovered money being laundered through Park Developments. He was planning to take his findings to the Financial Services Commission. "My associates viewed that as an unacceptable risk." "Your associates? You mean the Yang Uni remnants you've been working with?" A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his features. "You've been thorough too. Your husband would be proud." "Don't." The word came out sharp as broken glass. "Don't you dare talk about him like you knew him. Like you have any right to his memory." Tae-joon's jaw tightened. "You think I wanted this? You think I built my business wanting to be connected to gangsters and criminals? I was young, ambitious, desperate to prove myself. They offered funding when no legitimate bank would touch me. By the time I understood the price, I was already too deep. The Yang Uni network doesn't let you leave. Soo-min. You either serve or you disappear. So you became one of them. I became useful to them. There's a difference. He moved closer, his voice dropping. The school isn't what you think. Yes, I launder money through it. Yes, I use it as a legitimate face for illegitimate operations. But I also actually fund scholarships, actually improve facilities. The donations are real, they just serve dual purposes. And more importantly, I keep the Chil Sung-pa out. Soo-min blinked. The Chil Sung-pa? Another syndicate. More vicious, less controlled. They've been trying to expand into this territory for 3 years. If I wasn't here, using my connections to hold them back, they'd have taken over the school, the neighborhood, everything. You think I'm dangerous? They'd turn this place into a drug market, a prostitution ring, things that would make money laundering look like a charity service. He was trying to reframe himself as a protector and necessary evil. And the worst part was, there was probably truth in it. The old Kangpai had operated on strange codes of honor, protecting their territories even as they exploited them. But that didn't absolve him. My husband still died, she said quietly. You still let them kill him. I know. And for the first time, Park Tae-joon's carefully maintained composure cracked. I tried to convince them there were other ways, that we could discredit him, make his findings look like mistakes. But they didn't listen. And by the time I knew what they were planning, it was too late. I've carried that weight every day since. Is that why you pursued me? Guilt? No. He looked away, toward the crowd of oblivious parents celebrating. I pursued you because I'm tired. Tired of this life. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the kind of man my son will eventually learn to fear. When I met you, first in the files about your husband, then in person at that restaurant, I saw something I'd forgotten existed. Strength without cruelty. Integrity without stupidity. I thought maybe if I could be close to you, some of that might rub off. That's not how redemption works, Soo-min said, though her anger was warring with an emotion she didn't want to name. Pity, maybe. Or recognition of a shared brokenness. I'm not looking for redemption. I'm looking for an exit. Tae-joon turned back to her, and his eyes held a desperate sincerity that was more frightening than any threat. Help me. Work with me. We can expose the real powers behind the Yongyuni networks, the politicians, the business leaders, the police who've been enabling this for decades. But I can't do it alone. I need someone they won't see coming. Someone with everything to lose and nothing left to fear. Someone like a widow you made. Someone like a mother who won't let her daughter grow up in a world run by monsters. The auditorium lights dimmed for the scheduled presentation. Some administrator thanking donors, awards for PDA service. In the darkness, Soo-min studied the man who'd destroyed her life and was now asking her to save his. Could she trust him? Absolutely not. Could she use him? Maybe. I want names, she said finally. Everyone involved. Full access to the financial records. And proof that you tried to stop my husband's murder. I can give you the first 2. The third. He shook his head. I was a coward then. I have no proof of attempts that never happened. Then we have nothing to talk about. She started to walk away, but his hand caught her arm. Not roughly, but with urgency. They're moving the operation. Next week. Everything stored in the basement will be redistributed to new locations. If you want evidence, this is your last chance. But Soo-min, listen to me carefully. Once you move against them, there's no going back. They'll come for you. For Ji-woo. For everyone you love. Are you ready for that war? She pulled her arm free and met his eyes with a steadiness she didn't feel. They started this war 5 years ago when they murdered my husband. I'm just finishing it. The presentation ended. Lights came up. The crowd applauded politely. And in that moment, as Soo-min walked back into the gala's artificial brightness, she made her choice. Not to trust Park Tae-joon, but to use whatever help he offered while building her own case. She'd contact the journalists she'd identified, would feed them information slowly, carefully, building toward a story too big to suppress. She'd document everything in the basement before it moved, and she'd protect Ji-woo by making sure her daughter was far away when everything came crashing down. But first, she had to survive the next few hours. The attack came as she was leaving, walking toward her car in the parking garage. 3 men materialized from between vehicles, moving with practiced coordination. She saw the first one's face, not Park Tae-joon's men. She realized with cold clarity. Different tattoos, different style. Chil Sung-pa. They'd been watching the school, waiting for an opportunity. Soo-min ran. Her heels clattered on concrete as she sprinted toward the garage exit, fumbling for her phone. Behind her, footsteps pounded closer. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, using momentum to wrench free, and screamed, a sound that echoed off the low ceiling and brought people running from the gala entrance. Security appeared. The men vanished back into shadows. Soo-min stood shaking, surrounded by concerned parents and staff, and looked up to see Park Tae-joon at the garage entrance, his face a mask of cold fury. He'd been telling the truth about the Chil Sung-pa. They were making moves, testing boundaries, and she'd become a target simply by being connected to him through the school. "Take her home," Tae-joon ordered his security chief. "Make sure she gets inside safely. And I want 2 men outside her apartment until this is resolved." Soo-min wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence, but fear for Ji-woo overrode pride. She nodded mutely and let herself be escorted to a different car, driven by a stone-faced man who didn't speak the entire way to her apartment. Inside, she locked every door and window, pulled all the curtains, and finally allowed herself to break down. Tears came in harsh, choking sobs as the night's terror and tension released. She'd been so focused on fighting Park Tae-joon that she hadn't fully grasped she was now caught between 2 criminal organizations, neither of which had any reason to let her live. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The photos you took. Send them to this email. Tonight. You have my word you'll be protected. PTJ." Park Tae-joon's initials. He was offering alliance, or at least temporary cooperation. But could she trust a man who'd admitted to being powerless to stop her husband's murder? Could she trust anyone in this world of shadows and compromises? Soo-min looked at her daughter's empty bedroom, imagined Ji-woo's bright smile, and innocent questions about Hyun-ki's dragon drawings. Whatever choice she made now would shape her daughter's entire future. Running meant living in fear, always looking over their shoulders. Fighting meant risking everything. But there was a third option she hadn't fully considered until now. Not running, not fighting alone, but exposing everything, the whole corrupt system, so thoroughly and publicly that they couldn't silence her without confirming every accusation. A final gambit that required perfect timing and enormous risk. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to the journalists, attaching the photos, detailing everything she discovered. Then she created a second email to the Financial Services Commission, outlining the money laundering scheme. A third to the Seoul Police Commissioner, a fourth to several politicians she'd researched who'd built careers on anti-corruption platforms, all scheduled to send in exactly 48 hours unless she canceled them. Then she texted Park Tae-joon back, "You want out? Help me blow this whole thing open. All of it. The Yongyuni network, the Chil Sung-pa, everyone. Or I do it alone and you go down with them." The response came immediately, "You're insane." She typed back, "I'm a mother. Same thing when you threaten my child." A long pause. Then, "Meet me tomorrow. Hyun-ki's taekwondo practice. We'll talk." Soo-min set her phone down and stared at the ceiling, wondering if she'd just signed her death warrant or lit the first spark of actual justice. In 46 hours, the truth would detonate across Seoul's criminal underground and legitimate power structures simultaneously. Either she'd bring down an empire, or she'd become another tragic headline about a single mother who couldn't let sleeping dragons lie. Outside, one of Tae-joon's security men stood watch. Protection or surveillance? Probably both. Tomorrow she'd face the Mafia boss again. Tomorrow they'd plan the impossible. Tonight, she'd allow herself one last moment of doubt before committing fully to the path that couldn't be walked back. Can Soo-min and Tae-joon work together to bring down the criminal empire? Or will their fragile alliance crumble before they expose the truth? The Taekwondo dojang smelled of rubber mats and discipline, echoing with the sharp kahops of children practicing forms. Soo-min sat in the observation area, watching through the glass partition as young students in white doughbox executed kicks and blocks with varying degrees of competence. Hyun-ki was easy to spot, serious and focused, his movements precise in a way that suggested natural talent or extensive training. Maybe both. Park Tae-joon settled into the chair beside her without preamble. You're either brilliant or suicidal. I haven't decided which. The emails are ready to send, Soo-min said quietly, keeping her eyes on the children. In 45 hours, unless I stop them. You have until then to decide if you're helping or burning. If I help you, I lose everything. My business, my freedom, probably my life. You've already lost your freedom. You said it yourself. The Yang-uni network doesn't let people leave. This way, you at least choose how it ends. He was silent for a long moment, watching his son. Hyun-ki asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if you were angry at me. Apparently Ji-woo told him you seemed upset after we talked at the gala. Children notice more than we think. He asked if we were friends. Tae-joon's voice carried a strain of something raw. I didn't know how to answer. What are we, Soo-min? Enemies? Allies? Two people trapped in circumstances neither of us wanted. We're two parents trying to give our children better futures than our pasts would predict. She finally looked at him directly. That's enough to build on, even if we hate each other. I don't hate you. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. I envy you. The certainty you have about right and wrong. I lost that years ago if I ever had it. Soo-min pulled out her phone and showed him the prepared emails. Hundreds of pages of documentation, photos, testimonies, financial records. This is everything. Every politician who took Yang-uni money. Every police officer who looked the other way. Every business that laundered funds. It's comprehensive enough that no one can bury it, and distributed widely enough that silencing one outlet won't stop the story. Tae-joon scrolled through with increasing tension. This will destroy the entire network. Dozens of powerful people will go to prison. That's the point. They'll kill us before it even publishes. Not if we do it right. Soo-min took back the phone. The Chilsung-pa is already moving against you. They attacked me to send you a message. What if we use that? Stage a bigger confrontation. Make it public enough that the authorities have to respond. Once police are involved officially, the emails send automatically. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the evidence is everywhere. It was a plan born of desperation and late-night research into whistleblower protection strategies. Flawed, dangerous, dependent on timing and luck. But had one crucial advantage. It took the power away from the criminals and gave it to the public exposure they feared most. Tae-joon leaned back, his expression unreadable. The school inspection is in 3 days. Mandatory for license renewal. If Chilsung-pa were to somehow learn about the basement operation and tip off inspectors, it would trigger a police investigation automatically. Especially if there was, say, an altercation on school grounds that same day that required official reports. Soo-min's heart rate picked up. You'd sacrifice the school operation. I'd sacrifice the school operation to save the school itself. Once police investigate the basement, they'll find evidence of Chilsung-pa attempts to move in. We've documented their threats, their attacks. I make sure that documentation surfaces. The public sees a crime syndicate trying to infiltrate a children's school, and sees me as the businessman who cooperated with authorities to stop them. What about the Yang-uni connections? That's where your emails come in. While everyone's focused on Chilsung-pa and the school, the larger story breaks. Yongyuni network exposed. By the time anyone connects me to it, I'm already cooperating fully with prosecutors, offering testimony in exchange for protection. It was clever. Morally gray in about 16 different directions, but clever. Tae-joon would throw his criminal associates under the bus while positioning himself as an unwilling participant who'd been trying to protect the community from worse threats. The truth, Soo-min suspected, lay somewhere between his version and her darkest assumptions. What about my husband? The question came out harder than she intended. Do I get justice for that, or does it get buried under cooperation agreements? Tae-joon's face darkened. The man who ordered that hit is currently in charge of the Incheon port's operation. His name is Oh Sang-won. He'll be one of the first arrests when your evidence drops. I'll make sure of it. What happens to him after that, whether he's charged with murder or just financial crimes, I can't control. But I can put him in a cage. Not justice. Not really. But maybe as close as she'd get in a system where powerful men rarely faced full consequences. Soo-min swallowed her anger and focused on the practical. How do we make sure Chil Sung-pa shows up at the school on inspection day? I let them know the basement operation is moving on that date. Make it look like an opportunity. They'll bring enough men to try to hijack the shipment, which means enough for a very public confrontation. People could get hurt. People are already getting hurt. This way, at least some of them deserve it. They spent the next hour planning with the grim efficiency of people who understood they might not survive their own scheme. Soo-min would take Ji-woo and move to a safe house Tae-joon maintained, one his criminal associates didn't know about. Min-ji would cooperate with authorities in exchange for immunity, her testimony adding another layer to the evidence. The journalists would be briefed but not allowed to publish until the moment police arrived at the school, ensuring the element of surprise. As the taekwondo class ended and children flooded out, chattering and sweaty, Soo-min watched Hyun-ki bow respectfully to his instructor. He was a good kid, from what Ji-woo said. Polite, studious kind. He didn't deserve to lose his father, even a father as complicated as Park Tae-joon. If this goes wrong, she said quietly, Ji-woo will ask about you. About Hyun-ki. What should I tell her? Tae-joon's expression softened as he watched his son. Tell her that sometimes people make bad choices that they can't undo. But that doesn't mean they can't try to make better choices later. Tell her that Hyun-ki's father was trying to be brave at the end, even if he wasn't brave enough at the beginning. That's a lot of philosophy for a 10-year-old. She'll understand eventually. Kids have a way of figuring out the truth, no matter how much we try to protect them from it. The next 48 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Soo-min moved Ji-woo to the safe house, a modest apartment in Mapo that looked nothing like the luxury properties Tae-joon officially owned. Ji-woo accepted the sudden change with a child's flexibility, more concerned about whether she could still attend her friend's birthday party next week than why they were suddenly living somewhere new. Min-ji disappeared into protective custody after giving her statement to prosecutors. The journalists confirmed receipt of the embargoed documents. Police investigators, tipped anonymously, began preparing for the school inspection with extra officers on standby, though they didn't yet know why. On inspection day, Soo-min stayed in the safe house with Ji-woo, watching news feeds on her phone with obsessive frequency. Nothing. The morning passed normally. Then, just after noon, alerts started flooding in. Breaking: police investigate disturbance at Gangnam Elementary School. Developing: organized crime members arrested in school basement. Exclusive: financial records reveal massive money laundering network. The story exploded across every news outlet simultaneously. Photos of police escorting handcuffed men from Hanul Elementary. Helicopter footage of the basement being searched. Interviews with shocked parents and teachers. And then, as planned, the deeper investigation went public. Names, account numbers, political connections, everything. Soo-min's phone rang. Tae-joon, his voice strained but steady. It's done. I'm in protective custody. Sang-won was arrested an hour ago. They're charging him with racketeering, money laundering, and they're reopening the investigation into your husband's death based on evidence I provided. You provided? Records of communications between Sang-won and the man who sabotaged your husband's car. I've been keeping insurance files for years, in case I ever needed leverage. Turns out I did. Soo-min closed her eyes, letting relief and grief and exhaustion wash over her in waves. Hyun-ki, with his mother, my ex-wife, she left years ago because she couldn't handle what I was becoming. She'll take care of him. Maybe without me around, he'll have a chance to be normal. Don't talk like you're dying. Soo-min pulled out her phone and showed him the prepared emails. Hundreds of pages of documentation, photos, testimonies, financial records. This is everything. Every politician who took Yang Uni money. Every police officer who looked the other way. Every business that laundered funds. It's comprehensive enough that no one can bury it, and distributed widely enough that silencing one outlet won't stop the story. Tae-joon scrolled through with increasing tension. This will destroy the entire network. Dozens of powerful people will go to prison. That's the point. They'll kill us before it even publishes. Not if we do it right. Soo-min took back the phone. The Chilsung-pa is already moving against you. They attacked me to send you a message. What if we use that? Stage a bigger confrontation. Make it public enough that the authorities have to respond. Once police are involved officially, the emails send automatically. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the evidence is everywhere. It was a plan born of desperation and late-night research into whistleblower protection strategies. Flawed, dangerous, dependent on timing and luck, but had one crucial advantage. It took the power away from the criminals and gave it to the public exposure they feared most. Tae-joon leaned back, his expression unreadable. The school inspection is in 3 days. Mandatory for license renewal. If Chilsung-pa were to somehow learn about the basement operation and tip off inspectors, it would trigger a police investigation automatically. Especially if there was, say, an altercation on school grounds that same day that required official reports. Soo-min's heart rate picked up. You'd sacrifice the school operation. I'd sacrifice the school operation to save the school itself. Once police investigate the basement, they'll find evidence of Chilsung-pa attempts to move in. We've documented their threats, their attacks. I make sure that documentation surfaces. The public sees a crime syndicate trying to infiltrate a children's school and sees me as the businessman who cooperated with authorities to stop them. What about the Yang Uni connections? That's where your emails come in. While everyone's focused on Chilsung-pa and the school, the larger story breaks. Yang Uni network exposed. By the time anyone connects me to it, I'm already cooperating fully with prosecutors, offering testimony in exchange for protection. It was clever. Morally gray in about 16 different directions, but clever. Tae-joon would throw his criminal associates under the bus while positioning himself as an unwilling participant who'd been trying to protect the community from worse threats. The truth, Soo-min suspected, lay somewhere between his version and her darkest assumptions. What about my husband? The question came out harder than she intended. Do I get justice for that, or does it get buried under cooperation agreements? Tae-joon's face darkened. The man who ordered that hit is currently in charge of the Incheon port's operation. His name is Oh Sang-won. He'll be one of the first arrests when your evidence drops. I'll make sure of it. What happens to him after that, whether he's charged with murder or just financial crimes, I can't control. But I can put him in a cage. Not justice. Not really. But maybe as close as she'd get in a system where powerful men rarely faced full consequences. Soo-min swallowed her anger and focused on the practical. How do we make sure Chilsung-pa shows up at the school on inspection day? I let them know the basement operation is moving on that date. Make it look like an opportunity. They'll bring enough men to try to hijack the shipment, which means enough for a very public confrontation. People could get hurt. People are already getting hurt. This way, at least some of them deserve it. They spent the next hour planning with the grim efficiency of people who understood they might not survive their own scheme. Soo-min would take Ji-woo and move to a safe house Tae-joon maintained, one his criminal associates didn't know about. Min-ji would cooperate with authorities in exchange for immunity, her testimony adding another layer to the evidence. The journalists would be briefed but not allowed to publish until the moment police arrived at the school, ensuring the element of surprise. As the taekwondo class ended and children flooded out, chattering and sweaty, Soo-min watched Hyun-ki bow respectfully to his instructor. He was a good kid, from what Ji-woo said. Polite, studious kind. He didn't deserve to lose his father, even a father as complicated as Park Tae-joon. If this goes wrong, she said quietly, Ji-woo will ask about you. About Hyun-ki. What should I tell her? Tae-joon's expression softened as he watched his son. Tell her that sometimes people make bad choices that they can't undo. But that doesn't mean they can't try to make better choices later. Tell her that Hyun-ki's father was trying to be brave at the end, even if he wasn't brave enough at the beginning. That's a lot of philosophy for a 10-year-old. She'll understand eventually. Kids have a way of figuring out the truth, no matter how much we try to protect them from it. The next 48 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Soo-min moved Ji-woo to the safe house, a modest apartment in Mapo that looked nothing like the luxury properties Tae-joon officially owned. Ji-woo accepted the sudden change with a child's flexibility, more concerned about whether she could still attend her friend's birthday party next week than why they were suddenly living somewhere new. Min-ji disappeared into protective custody after giving her statement to prosecutors. The journalists confirmed receipt of the embargoed documents. Police investigators, tipped anonymously, began preparing for the school inspection with extra officers on standby, though they didn't yet know why. On inspection day, Soo-min stayed in the safe house with Ji-woo, watching news feeds on her phone with obsessive frequency. Nothing. The morning passed normally. Then, just after noon, alerts started flooding in. Breaking: police investigate disturbance at Gangnam Elementary School. Developing: organized crime members arrested in school basement. Exclusive: financial records reveal massive money laundering network. The story exploded across every news outlet simultaneously. Photos of police escorting handcuffed men from Hanul Elementary. Helicopter footage of the basement being searched. Interviews with shocked parents and teachers. And then, as planned, the deeper investigation went public. Names, account numbers, political connections, everything. Soo-min's phone rang. Tae-joon, his voice strained but steady. It's done. I'm in protective custody. Sang-won was arrested an hour ago. They're charging him with racketeering, money laundering, and they're reopening the investigation into your husband's death based on evidence I provided. You provided? Records of communications between Sang-won and the man who sabotaged your husband's car. I've been keeping insurance files for years, in case I ever needed leverage. Turns out I did. Soo-min closed her eyes, letting relief and grief and exhaustion wash over her in waves. Hyun-ki, with his mother, my ex-wife. She left years ago because she couldn't handle what I was becoming. She'll take care of him. Maybe without me around, he'll have a chance to be normal. Don't talk like you're dying. I'm not dying, but I'm disappearing, which is close enough. Witness protection, probably. New name, new life, somewhere far from Seoul's underworld. A pause. I know this doesn't fix what happened to your husband. Doesn't bring him back or give you the years you lost. But maybe it's something. It's something, Soo-min agreed quietly. Not enough, but something. They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, how the testimony would proceed, what would happen to the school, temporary closure, complete administration overhaul, where Soo-min and Ji-woo should go while the investigation unfolded. Then, as they were about to hang up, Tae-joon said something that caught her completely off guard. At that dinner, when you rejected me, it was the first honest interaction I'd had with anyone in years. Everyone else wanted something from me, or was afraid of me. But you just looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your time. It was refreshing, humbling, made me remember what it felt like to be just a person, not a position. I still think you're an asshole, Soo-min said, but without heat. I am an asshole. But maybe if things had been different, if I'd made better choices earlier, I could have been the kind of man worthy of someone like you. That's my real regret. Not the crimes or the consequences, but knowing I could have been better and chose not to be until it was too late. The line went dead. Soo-min stared at her phone, emotions too tangled to separate, anger, pity, exhaustion, and something that might have been forgiveness, or at least acceptance of complexity. Park Tae-joon wasn't a monster, but he wasn't a hero either. He was just a man who'd made bad choices, and then, finally, one marginally better choice. The investigations took months. Arrests rolled through Seoul's power structure like an earthquake, toppling politicians and business leaders and police officials. The Yongyuni remnants scattered or were captured. Chil-sun-pa retreated to lick their wounds. And slowly, painfully, Soo-min and Ji-woo returned to something resembling normal life. Ji-woo asked about Hyun-ki sometimes, where he'd gone, why he'd changed schools so suddenly. Soo-min told her the truth, or as much of it as a 10-year-old could understand. Hyun-ki's father had made mistakes, and sometimes when adults make big mistakes, families have to start over somewhere new. Do you think we'll ever see them again? Ji-woo asked one night, drawing pictures of dragons that looked suspiciously like the ones Hyun-ki used to draw. Maybe, Soo-min said. The world is smaller than we think sometimes. I hope he's okay. Hyun-ki, I mean. He was a good friend. I'm sure he is, Soo-min replied, and meant it. Wherever Tae-joon and his son had ended up, she hoped they found something like peace. Not redemption. That seemed too grand a word. But perhaps a chance to build something honest after years of lies. For herself, Soo-min discovered that closure was more complicated than she'd imagined. Knowing the truth about her husband's death didn't ease the grief, but it transformed it into something she could carry differently. She visited his grave one last time before deciding to stop these visits, said goodbye to the man he'd been and the future they'd lost, and turned toward the future she was building with Ji-woo. The school rebuilt with new administrators and new protocols, determined to never again become a front for criminal operations. Soo-min considered transferring Ji-woo, but ultimately decided that running from places because of their pasts wasn't the lesson she wanted to teach. They stayed, and slowly the scandal faded into neighborhood legend. Years later, Soo-min would sometimes think about that night at the gala, the moment when she'd chosen to fight instead of flee. Would wonder if Park Tae-joon had truly changed or just changed tactics. Would remember the fear and the anger and the strange, unwanted understanding that had developed between two people on opposite sides of an impossible situation. She never heard from him again. But sometimes, late at night, when Ji-woo was asleep and the apartment was quiet, she'd look at the city lights through her window and wonder if somewhere out there, under a different name in a different city, a man who'd once been a mafia boss was watching his own child sleep and thinking about the mother who'd forced him to choose between who he was and who he could still become. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even really peace. But it was an ending which was more than she'd thought she'd get when she'd walked into that restaurant 6 months ago and rejected a man whose shadows would nearly destroy her life. Justice was complicated. Morality was messy. But she'd protected her daughter and exposed a network of corruption that had operated with impunity for decades. That had to be enough. And if someday Ji-woo asked her why she'd risked everything, Soo-min would tell her the truth. Because sometimes the only way to keep the monsters away from your children is to turn on all the lights, no matter how many powerful people prefer the darkness. The end. In exposing the truth, Soo-min didn't just topple a mafia king. She reclaimed her own power and showed her daughter that even ordinary people can face extraordinary evil and survive. Sometimes justice isn't clean or complete, but it's still worth fighting for.